And Brenda, I'm just going to go ahead and pass it over to you if you don't mind giving a brief introduction to yourself.
Sure. And thank you so much to Rachel and Francesca for making it possible for me to have a conversation with all of you today. So I really enjoy this opportunity to meet all of you and to answer any questions you might have. And I guess in general, what Francesca mentioned is I'm currently the director of climate science at a science-based nonprofit based largely in the United States called the Union of Concerned Scientists. Thank you.
All right, so my first question for you is to tell us a little bit about your current position at the Union of Concerned Scientists.
Sure. So I really had this epiphany happen while I was on a tenure track faculty member, that the subjects that I was teaching a lot of my students, as well as the engaging research I was doing with graduate students, and I loved what I was doing. I had this sense that a lot of the research we were doing was not necessarily reaching the general public, because many of the aspects of the climate science and the impacts to water resources, to our world, as well as wildfires in the Western US where I was based in the faculty position, and decisions that were happening at the time seemed to be less informed by the science. And so I was not looking for another job, but this opportunity happened when I could end up working at the Union of Concerned Scientists. I can talk about more about that later. But the reason I came to UCS was basically they said, we want the science that you're doing as a scientist to reach members of Congress and the policy world, because they basically were telling us that you could count on two hands the number of members of Congress that had a PhD or an MD in the science-related field, all sciences. And yet many, many of the science infrastructure in the United States and what scientists depend on for a lot of their funding is determined by many people who do not have deep science backgrounds. So I joined Union of Concerned Scientists, and I'll just share with you some of the early things that I did. I can show a picture. This was perhaps the funniest thing I ever did was I went on Comedy Central, and if I just show you the scene, I couldn't believe this is happening to me. So bear with me while I share the screen. Essentially, I don't know if it's showing, but
we see it now, I think. Yep.
Okay.
There we go.
This is Colbert, and the Colbert Report in Comedy Central. They had a debate set up between a meteorologist, a broadcast meteorologist named Joe Bastardi at the time, and me, representing climate science, and the discord at the time between what broadcast meteorologists were necessarily saying about climate science at the time. And in fact, the show got this report based on the New York Times reporting on a survey of meteorologists, and they had a lot of skepticism about climate science at the time. So we did this little debate, and actually I have to say the 10-minute setup that they did, or I would say a long setup for Colbert Report of the science catfight portion, set the stage in a funnier way than we could ever be, right? We have to be the straight people, or shall we say the not funny people to the funny hosts, right? But there was a moment in here where the audience erupted in laughter when I replied to a question that was totally absurd from the Colbert Report. So I have to say that even though I had tons of science training and everything else at the Union of Concerned Scientists, there were these moments where I had to just be myself. And if it were not for some of the media training and the other aspects that they gave me, I don't think I could have done this moment if it weren't for the support of so many people at UCS behind the scenes. So what you end up seeing is a scientist being used at that moment to talk about science, but in the end, it's just a funny moment. You're trying to raise awareness about climate science at the time that this happened. So that was fun. One other aspect of my work is that when someone like Greta Thunberg comes to town and wants to rail against Congress, this is her, when she came to the United States, she sailed to the United States and went to DC, and they were doing, she showed up at a Friday's rally of, students taking a strike. And then they wanted, she requested a particular scientist who could not get to DC at that time. And I was the stand-in to help with the panel. And so these type of opportunities, sometimes just showing up and being able to be there is what our organization can provide when she can't get the scientist that Greta Thunberg wants, but can get someone that, is a climate scientist. And so these kind of opportunities are something that you find at a science-based nonprofit that is doing these kind of things. But I will go back to stop sharing my screen and say that most of what I do is science research that is not funded by the National Science Foundation, is not funded by federal agencies, is not funded by foreign governments or the US government or by private corporations. So we do independent research that helps inform the public discourse on climate change. That's what I do in my day job.
I'm sure there are many other things as well, but yes, thank you for that overview. And I'm sure students will have follow-ups too. But my next question now is to bring you back. We're going through time now. And what was your first job after graduate school? And if you could give us a little bit of information about how did you get that job? What was the application, the interview, the hiring process like?
Okay, thank you for that question. So I got my PhD at Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory of Columbia University, and literally it was my office mate. So pay attention to the friends you're hanging out with. Literally, he went and, well, the other thing is the collaboration that happens in grad school, because part of what I had to do was measure many, many, many ocean samples. And my office mate was doing a research study on the Hudson River, and I helped him collect some of the samples that we had to measure in the lab. And because he had such a few number of samples, and my PhD advisor was very protective of the lab, he said it would take too long for my office mate buddy to learn the skills of how to get good samples run through the lab. He asked me to run my office mate's samples. So I showed him how it was done so he could understand, but then I ran his samples. He got his PhD. He goes off to a postdoc, and they said, we really want you to design and run a lab like this. And he said, well, I have these samples in my PhD thesis and my publication, peer-reviewed publication, but the person you should really get is my office mate, Brenda. And so they set it up for an interview at one of the scientific society meetings that was nearby, that was happening. So I went to that meeting from, took a train down from New York to the Baltimore area, hopped off, went to this meeting, did the interview informally. Next thing you know, I'm doing a postdoc at North Livermore National Lab, which is one of the DOE weapons labs. And also Department of Energy does a lot of energy research and many other environmental research as well, which is what I was doing.
Great, thank you. So that networking aspect of it. And when we, Brenda and I chatted before as well, and something that you mentioned, and I think it was an interesting way of thinking about this too, is that yes, connections are important, but also they can be limiting because then it's only who you know, right? So also opening your world open, the career exploration process, I always say, should be about opening more doors than closing them. But yes, connections are important as well, and common in career stories. So thank you for that. So kind of, I guess, not sure where we are in time with this question, but what made you choose your career path? And I guess what experiences in graduate school best prepared you for your current work?
I would say in graduate school, again, in science, a lot of the, and I'll just, again, just share my screen one more time. If you look at what you do in science, a lot of it is 90% doing a repeat measurement over and over and over again, or doing, if you're doing model runs or simulations, doing many of these counterfactual universes, trying to figure out where, get enough statistics, enough data to understand what's going on in the science question you're trying to do. So a lot of the training I learned was that you had to pay attention to the details. You had to understand from the core aspects of not only what you're measuring, how that relates to questions that actually relate to people's lives, and not tell people about the details of how you get those answers turned out to be a really important skill. But you have to understand, if there's ever a reporter out there, I'm doing interviews with media all the time, and they always want to know, do you know what you're talking about? And any reporter that wants to go super deep, I can go there. And so all the preparation, that it's really a luxury in grad school to spend as much time as you are learning what you're learning. It is rare to have that time when you get further out. You get faster at it, but you get that foundation of critical thinking and what's going on. So yes, I spent most of my PhD I spent a year all told on different science expeditions up to the Arctic Ocean. And then my advisor gave me the opportunity to do that, even though my advisor is here in the middle, and this is his colleague on the other ship, and we met only once. This is at the North Pole. This is the water sampling device behind. But he needed me to do this work for his funding, yet my PhD was originally going to be in another area. But after this experience, I decided to work in a much more international way, because the many people I met and scientists on these research expeditions were from all over the world. And I got this bug in me, I wanted to learn about the bigger questions. And so that led to so many opportunities and a focus of that I had to, many of my current job today really digs into that deep well that I got during my PhD experience. I'll stop sharing.
Thank you. I love these photos. I can just tell from like the jackets and what you're wearing, I feel like expedition, field work. So second part of that question is there anything you didn't do in graduate school that you wish you had done?
Yes, I wish I had done more sharing of my research with my local community. I did do something where they had to ask some of us to take some students that were in middle school to high school in the area of the New York City and larger metropolitan region, and take these students who didn't have opportunity for field trips and just take them to different areas in Central Park, in different places around the city, to show them, earth science, environmental sciences, climate science, and different ways of looking at the world. And so we did volunteer to do some of those activities, but I wish I had done more of that, because I think learning how to talk and share your science in a more practical way would have prepared me, and I would have made less mistakes along the way earlier in some of my even just science communication with lots of specialists. They teach you to impress the 5 people that are the specialists in the world, and you can do that through peer review, but not as much emphasis on also making sure you're bringing in those broader impacts of colleagues that might want to do research with you. I would do more interdisciplinary research than I did at the time.
Thank you. And so my last question for today is, what advice do you have for current PhD students nearing graduation?
What was really interesting to me was literally about 3 to 6 months before I defended my PhD, this book arrived from the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences in our mailboxes. And it was this book that said, getting the best or the most you wanted out of a PhD. And I wish I had had that at the beginning of my career, because it really advocated for you being an advocate for your own PhD experience, listening to other students, which I learned the hard way. They really know what's going on and what's going on in the world, and who to really find opportunities that are out there. And the other thing is, it really prepared me for what was happening for those last 6 months of a PhD. It told you, when you're closing out your PhD and trying to finish, what's going to happen in your personal life and what's going to happen while you're finishing up. It's an intense period. It's like nothing else in your life. And many people will support you, and then there's some that won't. And you have to weigh that out, discard those who are not supporting you at the moment, and reconnect with them later. And I found that really empowering at the time, because there were people that I was realizing I was giving my time away to. Like, for example, measuring other people's samples. I had to get a little more, I was being used to measure. I was so good at it that, I was like, wait a minute, I have to measure my samples. I can't just be measuring everyone else's. Also, just in my personal life. And so I would say that, I don't know, probably that book is so dated now, but that idea of really being your own, following your own compass, and seeking the advice of those just ahead of you on what they had wished they had done, can go a long way. And I bet there's many stories at GSAS, in the Office of Career Development, where they can share some of that, connections for people who are recently graduating, and what that journey is like to today.
Yes, thank you. I love that, being an advocate for yourself and saying, being open and saying there will be people who support you and maybe those who do not. And I like how you said, reconnect with them later at a different point, perhaps. And I think, keeping those doors and those lines of communication open, though. All right, so I'm going to stop the recording and now open it for questions. Yes, I want to say